Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. We have another dominance person for you here. He's an OG. He's well known in the community. Not only is he a second-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, he's a third-degree black belt in judo. He's my coach at the moment while Lincoln Hancock is overseas, attempting to teach me stand-up. Very, very challenging, but you're doing a great job of it. He is Kirren Robson-Garth. Thanks for joining us, Kirren.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys, Kim and Anton.
Cheers.
I appreciate you saying that I'm your coach at the moment. I don't really see myself as a coach. I'm more like, at best, substitute teacher. Or maybe the front attendant on the front of the mat.
Sometimes
you're making stand-up really fun, really enjoyable, actually. Sorry, Anton, go on.
Sometimes
stand-up can be both fun and very painful, and you want to try and avoid as much painfulness as possible. Otherwise, you just run. Sorry, Anton.
That's fine. I was going to say sometimes substitute teachers can kind of make that difference where the main teacher can't. You know, sometimes they come in and they just give you a different look, a different thing, a little detail. You know, and it's a great thing. But Kim, before we talk to Kirren more, what in your view, what is Kirren's teaching style? Like, talk a bit about his teaching style.
Well, I thought when we knew that Kirren was taking Lincoln's spot for 2 weeks because Lincoln's away in the US for North American Masters and to support the guys that are doing Worlds. And I guess a little bit of apprehension that, stand-up, it's something that I think a lot of jiu-jitsu people have probably neglected. I certainly have for my entire jiu-jitsu. Like, if you get one takedown or one throw, that's good. You know, that's good enough for most of the time, but I don't even have that. I really don't. So I've been pulling guard for my entire jiu-jitsu. So it's like, it's time to get out of your comfort zone, thinking I'd be having to throw big people and, really carry their weight. But it hasn't been any of that so far, to be honest. It's mostly just been about off-balancing people, feeling a little bit more comfortable on the feet, and just looking for those kind of opportunities. So, yeah, it's been really, really good. I think the others are feeling the same too.
Oh, good. I'm glad you weren't too harsh. I think the litmus test is going to be, can you throw Theo? You throw Theo,
a little way off.
I
love it.
That's still a work in progress. That's still a way off.
Someone's got biceps the size of your torso. You've got to really sort of the technique sharp to be able to get him down.
Yeah.
And he's good. His stand-up's really good.
He edits this, so he's definitely going to keep that part in of this episode. He likes to make himself sound good.
What's your view on that? Actually,
sure.
Should smaller people attempt to take down bigger people? Like, should it be plan A, or should they be like, there's a good chance I'm going to end up with this person on top of me? So, what would your advice be in that situation?
Well, which would you rather? Would you rather pull guard and they're on top of you? Would you rather throw them and you have the chance of being on top?
So create a scramble.
I mean, or just be on top.
Yeah.
I mean, my whole my whole sort of competition career is against people who were just significantly larger than me. I think the biggest difference ever, I had one match against a guy, Big Phil. It's a problem when people refer to them and their first name is Big. So
I identify as big.
He just identifies as, gigantic. So he was so big, they got him on the scales, but the scales only got up to 150 kilos. So they put 1 foot on one scale and 1 foot on another scale. Now, I don't think this is like a realistic way to measure people, because I'm sure there's some error in there, but they estimated he's 175 plus. And I was 90 kilos at the time. So in short, I think if you're smaller, you should be able to take down someone big if you've got enough skill.
Did you take him down?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
with probably the dumbest, one of the dumbest throws ever, which is Tominagi, which is like a front sweep.
Yeah.
So their whole body weight is supported with one of your legs.
Ooh. Why did you choose that, man? What happened? Was that just
desperation?
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, I suppose to me, like I kind of cycle through my throws that I've got available from whatever group set I've got. And I've trained myself over the years to just pull the trigger without thinking about it. So I mean, that's a big part of it, right? You just got to pull the trigger and go for it. Otherwise, it's definitely not going to work. And then it came up. So no think, just do.
Wow. Amazing.
Would that be your advice for other jiu-jitsu people out there, you know, in that moment? Because I guess the reality is people don't really do a lot of stand-up in jiu-jitsu. On the whole, I think most academies only do a very small part of their training standing up. So what would you suggest for people faced with that, you know, our listeners out there?
It depends on what your psychology is, I think. If your psychology is, I'm in the right moment, I've got my grip set, I've got the Kazushi, I've got them off balance, and I know this throw and I'm good at this throw, go for it. But if your mindset is, I'm tired and I'm desperate, do I go for it? Don't go for it. Because often what happens is when you get tired, you start losing your ability to rationalize things properly. And then you get desperate, and then you might just pull the trigger on the wrong thing. So if you're tired, I'd say no. If you're sort of getting desperate, definitely not. But if it's a case of you can see the pattern and you've been familiar, then definitely go for it. But it's hard to sort of recognize the difference between the two sometimes because there's like a buildup of anxiety and there's a buildup of like tension, and you're like, oh crap, I got to go for the thing, you know. But sometimes you think it's because you've got it, and sometimes you think you've got it, but actually you're just desperate. So if you can separate those two mindsets, then and you can direct yourselves towards one that you're familiar and you're good at, then go for it.
I don't know if you guys experience this the same.
Really makes
yeah
Sorry?
makes sense. Yeah.
You like, for me it's like maybe if there's a cold shower running and I've got to jump in it, or it's a bungee jumping thing and I got to jump off it. It's that moment before you go where you hesitate. And it's like, for me, what's running through my mind is, I don't want to screw this up. I'm already on the feet. They haven't got me. I haven't got them. And it's a hesitation more than a fear or anything. Is that like what?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Or what's some advice you can give me about that?
Some advice in terms of how to push yourself beyond the fear?
I guess so, but it's not a fear. It's like a hesitation. It's more, you know what I mean? I don't think I'm going to get hurt by going for something necessarily. I just feel like it's not going to work. And
it's like your mind protecting yourself, I think, from the potential outcome, which could be bad.
Well, if you think it's not good, yeah, I agree. But if you think it's not going to work, then don't do it. Okay. I mean, you got to at least think it's going to work first. Because I think sometimes people go in and they go, well, I'm sort of not quite have the grip set. I've practiced it in training. It doesn't work very often. I would say don't do it. Unless, of course, you're super safe. Like one of the things that we working on the last week and a half doing stand-up is if you can make sure that someone doesn't have access to your head for like a guillotine, headlock, that sort of thing, their weight is not on you and they don't get access to your back as you're attempting to throw, then the worst case is it doesn't work and you can just step back to a sort of neutral position. But if you're going for like a single or a double, and you're like, I'm not sure if this is going to work, you blast into that double, and then you're in trouble because you didn't quite set it up properly or you didn't quite get them off balance. And the moment before you go that, if you're hesitating on those type of throws where you think there's a possibility of being in danger, I just wouldn't do it.
Okay.
As simple as that. But if you're going to do dangerous throws like a front sweep, singles, doubles, Sianagi, any of those throws where you're sort of dropping underneath, then you really need to get your ratios up in training. You need to be looking at like 98% because you don't want to be hitting it on someone and then, let's say you got a 50% ratio and you go to competition. Well, you're going to be worse.
Yeah.
You're going to probably
that's the thing. So I'm doing the right thing by hesitating, but I got to practice more.
100%.
I got to practice this more.
Yeah. Get that takedown to like a high level before you get it going in competition. But then there's a counter to that as well. This is the counter, is that if you manage to get the timing right in a competition and they go over the top, it'll burn into the back of your brain and it will work for you forever. So for me, I would get Seoinage working. Seoinage, like, you know, the shoulder throw where you throw them over your head.
Yeah.
I would get that in training, I don't know, a fair amount of time, but it wasn't 100% successful. And then one time I hit it in competition. Well, this was probably 2 decades ago. And the timing seems to just locked in my brain after that. It worked. And after, like, and now I don't even need to practice it. It just works every time.
Nice.
So
Makes sense.
that's the counter to it, is that
Hit it in comp.
if you get it, you'll stay forever.
And you own it. Hit it in comp and you own it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely that
100%.
confidence, isn't it, of like having the ability to make that commitment and just go for it rather than like, and no, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So you're a 3rd degree in judo. So you started judo first. How did you come about that?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I have very little memory about when I started, because I started so young. And there was a place in Eltham which is now defunct, and it was this big shed at the back of the train station that they used to teach judo there, and it was packed. Like, there were lots of people. I have some memories vaguely, but you know how jiu-jitsu people say, "Oh, I don't want to get thrown on my head, therefore I don't want to do stand-up." Well, I remember back then I got thrown on my head, and I hated it.
How young were you? What?
Probably under 10 for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Probably 8, probably 9, somewhere in that range. Not 100% sure. And I'd have to go ask my parents actually to find out exactly. But I trained there for a bit, but I hated it, and eventually I managed to convince my parents to stop. But then years later, I was 18 years old, and one of my friends was telling me about a club that he was training at. It was a judo club. I was like, oh yeah, I sort of vaguely remember that sort of thing. So I was like, yeah, I'll come down. He invited me down. I came down, and it was amazing. So there's another place actually in Eltham called Preston Judo Club, even though it's called Preston.
It's
in
not
Eltham.
in Preston. Yeah.
It's not impressive. It's not impressive. But he was just trying to like continue the name from his predecessors. So anyway, I go to this club, and the coach's name, Peter Allway, I think he's a 5th or 6th dan, and like kind of a red-white judo belt, like a coral belt in jiu-jitsu. So I go down there, and I was super impressed. First of all, he was a mechanical engineer, and I was impressed with how well he articulated everything mechanically. But then also, he's got this 3-door garage that's underneath his house, and you go in there, and he presses a button, and the mats lower from the roof, and it's the full 3 doors of mats coming down. And amazingly, they're not like a rough mats. It's a sprung floor, so canvas, some soft mats, then a timber sprung floor. It was both super impressive and also really, really dangerous, because they've got 6 cables come down, and they've got a big weight hanging on either side of them. And so when it hits the ground, you've still got these chains, all the way around the mat. The number of times I've been thrown into those chains, like bruises. In fact, the whole mat is very, it's well stained with our vomit and blood from the many years of training there. But nice. It's nice to be thrown on those mats. You get thrown on a jiu-jitsu mat and it hurts. You get thrown on these ones, it's a pleasure.
A cloud.
So yeah, it was. But my first night, I remember my first night there. I don't remember my first night when I was a kid, but this one here, I was 18 years old. My mate Robin took me down, and it was really great listening to the technique. He was kind of like a John Danaher type, but with white hair. And classes are very similar to jiu-jitsu, hour and a half. You do all the technique, and at the end, you do what they call randori, which is like basically rolling. And you start from standing. And I had a couple of rolls with some of the guys, and obviously I got destroyed. But then I had a roll with this one lady, Carly, who was a year younger than me at the time, and she's only 57 kilos. And I can't forget it, because it was just unbelievable situation. She grabs hold, throws me with a seoinage. Then I turned to turtle. She locks up like a bow and arrow stroke, like a rolling bow and arrow, rolls through and chokes me out. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this possible? She's 57 kilos, absolutely destroyed me. At the time, I was probably 80 kilos, so a bit lighter than I am now, but it was, I'm not going to say humiliating, but it was just like, it was more inspiring than anything to see that someone so small could do something. She ended up going to the Olympics. So she's very good. And since then, her brother became my main training partner, her brother Glenn. And so we went all the way up to black belt, but it was a really old school sort of hardcore style of training where we'd be there, and it would, most nights it would just be maybe 2, 3, 4 people. I think the maximum we ever got on the mat was like 10 people, but everyone became national champion at one point just because of how hardcore it was.
Wow.
So it was, yeah, it was great.
That story that you tell is similar to quite a lot of our guests with their introduction to jiu-jitsu as well. Wouldn't you say, Anton? Like,
Yeah,
they get that small
absolutely.
person that beats them up and they're like, I want to figure this out. How is this person doing this to me?
Destroys them.
Wow.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
It was so fast.
Yeah. What would you say as far as, like, you talk about rolling in judo, and like, I don't think it's a conversation we've had a lot, but what is in a club, what is a judo roll like versus a jiu-jitsu roll in a jiu-jitsu club? Because I don't, like, judo occurs to me as like very good at the stand up, and then once it gets to the ground, it's kind of like, well, it's more limited. That's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but and like we do rounds in jiu-jitsu of like 5 minutes. What happens in a judo club when you do rounds? How does that all work?
Well, our coach used to like to punish us, so so rounds were sometimes until someone lost. And we also did a lot of groundwork as well. So groundwork in judo is called niwaza, and so we'd start on the ground. So some rolls you'd say would look exactly like a jiu-jitsu match, and other rolls there's just no groundwork at all. And in terms of timing, judo has a proclivity towards going hard and fast. And in fact, competition matches now for adults are only 4 minutes, so they're pretty quick. And the intention is to try and get them to go like for the ippon, for the big throw. While jiu-jitsu matches, adults, you're looking at like 10 minutes. And, obviously you've seen some of these matches now that are just unlimited until someone loses. Where judo, it's just, yeah, it's a lot more intense, probably more painful on your fingers long term, because constant grip breaking.
Wow.
And judo people don't really treat groundwork like you're trying to control them and lead towards a submission. If you control them, you win. So if you get a hold down and it's 20 seconds, that's game over. You've won that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And you almost never have to pass someone's guard either, because as soon as they're on the ground, they're going to turn to turtle, or they're going to turn face down and just protect their neck like this. And so half of your issue is getting to the back and then turning them over. So it's kind of it's pretty much the same, but there's probably just slightly more emphasis on the stand up, and then there's less emphasis on controlling people on the ground.
Interesting.
So that leads us in nicely then to, how did you make the transition to jiu-jitsu? How did you discover that?
So it's been a bit of a progressive steps to where we are now. But me and Glenn, I was telling you about before, probably 7, 8 years on after training, we ended up both getting our black belts. And then we're like, well, we want to cross train, we want to do a couple other things. And now, obviously by now everyone's heard about jiu-jitsu. So we're mid-20s, we're hearing about this jiu-jitsu, a lot of people talking about it. It's getting a lot more popular. So I looked it up, a couple of local people see where we could train, and I found Dave Christic, which I'm sure you guys know. Have you had Dave Christic on?
Yeah, we've had him on.
Yeah.
He's also the reason I started jiu-jitsu. He introduced it to me. So
oh, right.
World. Yeah.
Did you ever train in his garage?
No, my ex-husband did. That's how I know Dave. They worked together.
Right.
And he would just be prattling on all the time about jiu-jitsu. What's this jiu-jitsu thing? So yeah, they started together, or not together, but yeah, he used to train with him. Yeah.
Very interesting. You never know. We could have crossed paths in the past and not realized it.
That's it.
So yeah, I phoned up Dave, and he sounded super sweet on the phone. I'm like, oh wow, fantastic. So me and Glenn go down to this place, and there is this gigantic human, because right now he's about 100 kilos, but back then he was not 100 kilos. He was gigantic, just muscly and he's what, 6'6"? He's got to be at least 6'6".
Yeah.
So big. Yeah, ridiculous. Anyway, we go down there, and me and Glenn training for judo, training for the nationals, wanting to try and improve our groundwork. We did the class again. Another technical master. I could listen to Dave Christie talk all day long. His anecdotes are just unbelievable and so interesting too. So we go through the class.
And then in Doncaster?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry.
So we're there and we're looking at the mats. And it's in a garage. We're familiar with training in a garage. That's all we've done so far.
What is it with you in garages?
I know. So we look at the mats, and the mats are those really rough jigsaw mats that just pieced together. They're pretty cool. But me and Glenn are both, as soon as we saw them, we're thinking, oh man, these people are going to be in trouble when we throw them.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, we're having a roll with some of his students, and me and Glenn had no problem with purple belts, blue belts, that sort of thing. So we were getting some taps on these guys. But then we both had a roll with Dave, and he absolutely smashed us. Even stand up, he took us down, both of us. We couldn't believe it. But the rule set's different. So he was breaking all the rules. He was grabbing the legs. He was doing a whole bunch of things that we weren't expecting. And amazing. I went there as often as I could until such time as Glenn basically disappeared. The problem with this guy, who he's awesome, but every time he gets a girlfriend, he just disappears for months at a time. So
people like that in jiu-jitsu. Come on.
He's like, well, where are you going, Glenn? But now he's married and he's not training anymore. But I know. So and work took me away from it. So it was quite kind of hard to get there very often. But eventually I was trying to continue judo the whole time. It's very difficult when you've got, obviously family, kids, whatever. And I was working in the city and ended up training at Ground Zero. Are you guys familiar with Rob Williams?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you had him on?
No, not had him on yet. No, we should.
Yeah, he's
one.
He's a character.
He's a character. And he's very good at, I think, training people sort of up to like a blue belt level. His fundamentals are really good, and he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
So I trained there for a bit, and I ended up teaching judo there as well for 5 years until I found Dominance. Trained at Dominance was maybe a decade ago, was an absolute monster of a place because it had all of Dan Kelly and Maria Peckley's people there. So it was like Dominance judo, and then it also had all of the amazing jiu-jitsu people as well. So it was great. I just go there, and in one night I'll do an hour of jiu-jitsu and an hour of judo. Go home completely destroyed, but you get both in.
Wow, that's cool. What should be harder? Because I guess every club's different. Some clubs kind of make it easier to get belts. Other clubs make it harder. So I guess it's a how long's a piece of string question to a degree. But in your view, should it be harder to get a jiu-jitsu black belt or harder to get a judo black belt?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to do both, the second one's usually easier.
The second one's easier. So, if you weren't going to do both, like if you could run in a parallel universe side by side, because you've done both, what would be harder to get?
So interesting. What should be harder? I mean, I would think that the end result should be about the same. Okay. So the person who ends up with their black belt should be able to do stand up and be able to do groundwork with slightly more emphasis on the other. I mean, I value them both just as much. So I would think that the minimum requirements should be just as much. But the thing that's different from a grading perspective is that jiu-jitsu has a kind of a loose grading perspective. It's very loose, and it's more about lineage. So who was your coach? Who was their coach? Following all the way up, is that a respectable path to progress? Where judo has a centralized body that determines the grading criteria and grades you. So you'll go to your coach, and they'll grade you yellow, orange, green, blue, brown, up to brown, and then they'll recommend you for black. But then to achieve a black belt, you have to do kata. You need 150 points in competition. You need to do all 40 throws of the Gokyo. You need to do a whole bunch of groundwork techniques, and then you got to demonstrate it at the Victorian judo grading event that happens.
Right.
So it's I've sort of sidetracked your question a bit, but
it's a great answer.
Yeah. That's how they do it.
Yeah, interesting.
So you're actually teaching your two boys jiu-jitsu and judo as well, yeah? Your sons?
Well, I don't really teach them much. I don't really teach, like, I don't teach them anything at the house. I more just give them advice along the way. You know, so we'll drive to jiu-jitsu and I'll explain some things to them on the way there. So as you can tell, like, if you've rolled with Lex on stand-ups, he's the youngest one, 14-year-old. He's a monster when it comes to stand-up. And I've seen him take down black belts, 100-kilo black belts. Last night he was sitting on top of a purple belt who's probably 95 kilos. So he gets the system, and the system's pretty easy. But I want them to at least understand the system. Well, actually, one thing I've done, I don't know if you can see this one. This says Supreme Judo here.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was progressing, like a third dan, to get to fourth dan, it's quite difficult because you've got to get a lot of competition points. And so I was thinking, one of the ways you can get more points towards your fourth dan is to set up a club. So I actually have set up a club. Not that I'm going to compete with anyone, and this is not something where I'm going to go start another mat somewhere. But I set it up so that I could grade my boys and teach them sort of at jiu-jitsu and get them graded up.
Smart.
So it's called Supreme Judo. So I set that up.
I love it.
You can see, like, the guys are kind of doing a Sianagi.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if you can see this. That's the logo.
Nice, very nice.
So, yeah. So I've set this up, but then Winks asked me to. He was like, "I want to be graded as well," and Juzzy and Muzz and a bunch of other people. So I said, "All right, anyone who's got some sort of aptitude towards stand up, I'm willing to bring them on, and we'll just take everyone through the yellow belt grading, and we'll take a year to do it, and then we'll just grade a whole bunch of people." So Kim as well.
Wow, I'm a way off. I'm so far off yellow belt. That's not even. I'm not even a white belt in judo anymore.
That sounds fun.
No.
I could be up for that. Do I have to be a dominance?
Yeah, well, for sure, but you have to come train with us.
That's fine, man. Well, yeah, yeah, that's definitely doable, man. I know at Thomastown. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so we're going to run a series of seminars to go through it and make sure we understand all the criteria. I've already set up a website, set up a logo. It's a bit of a fun passion for me, but also, like, I don't want to, like, waste the skill set that I've got and just not teach anyone. I get told all the time by some of the 5th, 6th stands that you got to go and start teaching more judo. So it also is one of those things that's going to help drag more people back into doing judo. And I'm pretty sure Ivan and Jazz and a few of the others would be keen to do some judo competitions. And it's great. Like, throwing people in a judo tournament is fantastic. Great. It feels great. Think about it for a long time. Yeah. So where are you training at the moment, Anton?
I train at Absolute and at G-Force. So I train at 2 clubs. Why not a third? You know, I always say I'm a creonch.
So am I. Hey, I'm full on. And Kirren, I heard rumor has it that your youngest son is pretty close to passing your guard. Is that true?
Wishes. He's probably closer to taking me down than passing my guard.
See, this is the thing, Anton. As much as Kirren talks about his stand-up and his judo, he actually has an awesome guard. So can you talk at all about that, like how you developed your guard, given, like, to be honest, a lot of judo people, when they come in, they're not a fan of the guard. Like, how was that for you in the early days of jiu-jitsu?
Same. I didn't play guard until purple belt.
Interesting. What
So,
did you develop it? Why did you choose to develop it?
Because I kept getting smashed. So I was there's so many good jiu-jitsu people at Dominance that I ended up realizing that I need something, because once you get turned over onto you, once you get swept, if you do get swept, you don't want it to be a guarantee of losing. And that was when you're wrestling with people, you can take them down, you can pass the guard, that's fine. But if you take them down, or at least you're on top, and then they sweep you, then all of a sudden you're in a situation where you've got nothing. So I had to develop something, but also I don't like to be someone who doesn't know what's going on. I want to know all the different parts. And I think the thing that really made it actually work for me was I dislocated my middle finger. And for probably 6 months I had to wear a glove on my right hand. And so for that whole time, I was just thought, well, I can't really do any competition, so I'm not going to work on my A game. I might as well work on the thing that I'm absolutely terrible at, which is playing guard. So I wore this glove, played guard with just one hand. And then after that, I was like, oh, this thing actually works. It's actually a pretty good system. And it's, it has a bit of merit. So I stuck with it.
Beautiful. I've got another question, Kim. Is it my question again? So like, you have choices, right? Going into your kind of more mature years, I'm going to say, you've got choices about kind of what you'll pursue. And I know there are like 90-year-old judokas. There are definitely 90-year-old jiu-jitieros. What is, well, like, yeah. I guess what I'm saying is judo going to break down your body such that you will have to do more and more jiu-jitsu and less judo, do you think? Or is judo really something you can do to old age?
Well, I think it's a bit of an individual thing. So I was finding probably 10 years ago, actually no, 12 years ago now, that my back was hurting a lot.
Right.
And my fingers were hurting a lot. But I was still getting better from a judo perspective. And I realized that I was getting better not by doing the same training that everyone else is doing. A lot of judo clubs do throw for throw. So, and the technique's called run and throw. So you'll have three people. You have one person at one end of the mat, another person on the other mat, and the person in the middle. And the person in the middle will sprint to one person, throw them, sprint to the other person, throw them, sprint to the other.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the positive sign of things like that is that it trains you to not be afraid of being thrown, and it trains you to sort of like be, I suppose, just tough. But I was finding that I was just getting hurt, so I couldn't bring myself to keep doing that constantly. So nowadays, the way I do it is I go home and I think about what techniques I want to work on in judo, and then I'll go and do it at jiu-jitsu. But then I still compete in judo, but I just don't go to like a formal judo club anymore.
Wow. And is that doing good for your judo? Is your judo improving as a result of that?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, in 2021, I was still #1 in Australia, and I was on the rankings. But like, and that's like no judo training whatsoever.
That's
so
very interesting.
But I mean, you know, like there's a lot of jiu-jitsu training which is very, very similar.
Yeah.
But in terms of longevity, so my mate Omar, who is 57, he's still competing. He won the state titles a few weeks back. We used to train with some people who were in their 70s, and that's still launch people. So I think you can do it if you look after yourself and you sort of manage your own grip, manage your fingers, make sure you don't hurt your fingers, manage your knees and ankles. You'll be right. You can do it forever, I think.
And a little birdie told me, Kirren, that you nearly made it to the Commonwealth Games. Is that right?
No. Well, look, no. I've run the ROIs on. I've got a spreadsheet for everything, but I've run the ROIs on progressing towards the Olympics, Commonwealth Games, those sorts of things. These are definitely, you know, I've certainly been in the top 10 plenty of times in Australia to go to these sorts of events, but the amount of commitment that you need to make, I've run the numbers, it's just not worth it. So you need to basically dedicate.
When you say you run the numbers, how do you calculate that? What's the investment and what is the return that we're talking about?
Well, the return is a medal. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the return is a medal. The investment is that you need to, yeah, that's a good question. You need to go overseas, you need to train overseas, you need to do a bunch of massive competitions overseas. And then the loss is the fact that I'm not working in my business.
Okay.
So you need about 100 grand to go to the Olympics, to go to the Commonwealth Games, unless it's in Australia, of course. Yeah. And yeah, it is like if you won a gold medal at the Olympics for judo, Japan, let's say, the Australian government will pay you $25,000 for a gold medal. It'll cost you more than that just to fly over there and stay there for the time. Yeah. So the whole thing is the whole thing's outrageous. But yeah, like I looked at there's a super uninspiring video on YouTube. There's this guy called Colin Oates, who is multiple national champion for Britain. And they said to him, could you give us some inspiring words about judo? And he goes, well, look, I'm broke. If you want to do judo, you got to do it because you love it, not because you're going to make any money out of it. And I was like, oh my God,
Wow.
it's making me not want to do it.
Well, that's some inspiring words to end on, I think. We've got less than a minute to go. So that's probably a good point to wrap this up. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I know you're a super busy man, and that was really great. Look forward to seeing you. I'll see you in a couple of hours on the mat. And
yeah, exactly.
We'll have this episode out in a couple of weeks. So thank you once again.
Excellent. Good to see you guys.
Kirren.
Talk to you soon.
Peace out.
Bye.
Yeah.